All right. So first, I just want to start off and say this is kind of just the intake interview, and anything that you say in here that might lead. So, like, if you tell me like you're going to harm yourself or harm anybody else, like I have to report that. So I just have to inform you that just starting off.
Fair.
Um, so with that being said, like just Ezra, just tell me a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Ezra, and I'm 24 years old. I high school graduate, little college. For the most part, like my occupation right now is I do security, but I also do I'm an actor working on doing some roles in cartoons and actual movies. I'm also a martial artist and I have a fight I'm working on taking. So that's usually what I am in a nutshell. So I'm a performer. I'm an entertainer. I like to think of myself as a deep person too. So
Okay. So kind of doing some acting.
mhm.
So it sounds like, I mean, you are really trying to get yourself out there.
Yeah.
Trying to. So like, what is your goal kind of in that direction?
Man, ever since I was a kid, I always wanted to act, to do acting. If you ever seen the movie The Cable Guy with Jim Carrey, yeah, see, that was a lot about that was a lot of my childhood, you know. And I didn't see that, until I was an adult, and I was like, get out, like, my dad, he'd put on something and leave. That was my, my daycare. So,
Yeah.
I grew up with like Daniel Boone and Andy Griffith and Fess Parker as your, father figure, and that's how I learned morals, or non-morals, in some instances. But yeah, so I'm most known probably for my martial arts, but I've actually technically done acting longer.
Okay.
If you go by years, I just haven't done as much acting as I've done martial arts, and I've been doing that for 12 years now, 12 and a half years now, and just continue doing it. So as acting, as the cable guy, you're always different people. I used to get bullied when I was a kid, so I never wanted to be myself.
Yeah.
And so acting, I love the idea of being able to tell stories. And even we used to work together,
Yeah.
and I used to always we'd tell them stuff all the time, and then through martial arts, I was able to open up a gateway to my acting. That was like my first love. So she's like my girlfriend that we can't talk about. Martial arts is my wife type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, through martial arts, my main coach is Bill Superfoot Wallace. He was in movies with Chuck Norris. He helped John Belushi. I don't know if you know who John Belushi was.
Yeah.
Blues Brothers. He helped him prepare for roles. Worked with Elvis. Michael Jai White. I befriended Michael Jai White through martial arts, and he helps try to guide me, here and there through acting, and hopefully, we'll be doing a project within the next year or so. No, don't tell anybody about that though. So yeah, and a lot of my childhood, heroes through martial, I've got to meet and get to do stuff with. So yeah.
So it sounds like your childhood and the things you grew up watching had a big impact on you as an adult now. So I guess kind of your parents, were they have any influence? Was you in the same home as your parents, or?
Yeah. So, because I was born in '96, and my mother left and took my two brothers in, I believe, '02, middle of '02. So my existence, and I've always told you this would be your psychology right here, and hear me out, is when I always tell people, like, my life was a mistake from the get-go. Okay, my mom had two kids from a previous marriage. She divorced when she met my dad. So when they got together, they had my older sister, and they were done. And the day before he's supposed to get fixed, I snuck through, because that was the only time that's the story.
Yeah.
But there is and I'm kind of I was led to believe this growing up. Now as an adult, I kind of way into trying to be more mature and thinking it. But I was told they wanted an abortion, like they did not want me. But in '96, not much you can do about it, and so
Yeah.
here I am, and I almost died, as a child. When she left, she took my two older brothers, and she came back for my sister, or she was trying to come back for my sister. and never wanted me. Well, so that's the kind of like I have the abandonment from my mom, and on my dad's standpoint, he just went crazy when she left. Like he starved us as a kid, So like I'd have to like he'd send me to the neighbors, to beg them for like food or something. Like he could eat, he'd go up to the the Ada travel stop and bring food back for him and Mariah, and I'll be coming over from the neighbors, and he'd be like, well, I didn't know if you'd be hungry. I'm like, I'm 7 years old. You'd think you want to take care of your kids. So I had a lot of issues like that. We never had good clothes. Like my dad, he's the kind of guy, because I'm Chickasaw, and they have a grant to where you could. I played basketball for the school, and this is when I was in Pickett. So this is elementary years, 5th, 6th, 7th, Okay. And they had this grant where they can get us some new gym shoes and warm ups and stuff, because it costs money. So the Chickasaws sent him a check to give to us to give to the school, and he took it, cashed it, gave me part of it, and then used the other part for something else. And so you're kind of like going up to school, and you're like, well, I only have part of my money, not all, and they're like, what, So that was the kind of culture I grew up in. But yeah, watching Andy Griffith, sure, it's a comical show, but old shows like that had morals. Yeah. They had principles, how to guide, Leave It to Beaver and All in the Family, stuff like that. I grew up with those. Yeah. And so I learned, like, man, I want to be like Daniel Boone. What always attracted me was the father figure, having a good relationship with the son. Even to this day, like I could be sitting here, and I think I've mentioned this to you before. If I see like a father-son moment, and like they're like, they look really happy, it's almost like a sense of like envy. Like, man, why couldn't I ever have that?
Yeah. So tell me about martial arts, how you got involved, what kind of led you down that path.
All right. Now that's gonna go to a bad direction, but I can talk about it without being like I grew up a little bit since then, if that helps. I remember those days. All right, so man, I always wanted to do martial arts. I never heard of it before. The first time I'd ever heard of it, my neighbor had these old plastic nunchucks. It's like some kind of ninja set, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And like hitting leaves off a tree with them. And my dad, he was anti-martial arts at the time, and my dad was, oh, that's not good, man. That's martial arts. And martial arts is it's bad, because his excuse at the time was, this is gonna sound weird, but he was really religious. Again, he would read the Bible all the time, and he'd be like, man, how could you read a book about love, essentially what the Bible is, and then do this to your kids? But it's not like he's like, oh, I'm gonna starve you. Like, it's not like he did it that way. He just starved you because he didn't think about it. So it's like, very childish. He quit growing at 12. Anyway, so he's saying martial arts. If you did martial arts, that means you didn't trust God to take care of you. Like, his philosophy was like, if you ever got into a fight, you need to pray for God to help take care of it. Whatever that means. I'm nodding approval, right? So he's trying to tell me this, and so what he does is, to help prove a point, he rents this movie. And I would always remember, and I didn't know what this movie was till later. This is great. This is classic. And I remember seeing this dude. He was Asian, and he'd beat up all these guys. And there's something about him doing nunchucks in a scene in this underground pit. You know what it is? Look at you. I know this. And then a bunch of mirrors, and this dude didn't have a hand. That's all I could remember. Now, when later, I'm going back, I found out that movie was Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee. Yeah, and I was like, oh, okay. I always wondered, So anyway, so I used to be after like, come on, let me take martial arts, and because being Chickasaw, the Chickasaw Nation had one and it was free, and so finally it came down and we had a talk, and I was like, look, I understand, and I was 12 when I started, so I would have been either just turned 12 or 11 at the time, because this is before I started. He gave him a few months to turn, I said, look, I understand the idea that, you should trust God. Your Bible says trust God. But if you look at the Bible, he's got some fighters in there. All right? How many does he have armies that he sends out? You know what I mean? Yeah. And so it's like, so God has fighters, right? Yeah. So why not let me learn how to fight and defend myself and use God as inner strength? And I probably did it sarcastically like that too. But I was being sincere. Yeah. A few weeks later, my uncle, who was taking the classes, messaged him, or called him, sorry, I'm used to, calls him, says, hey, I'd like to take Ezra with me on Thursday. And so he said, well, let me ask him if he wants to. It cracks me up, because he knows I've been after him forever. Like, hey, let me do martial arts. Right. She's like, hey, Russ is going to martial arts. He wants to know if you want to go. Let me think about that. You know what I mean? So anyway, I went, and the rest is history. Yeah. So that school has a good and a bad spot for me. All right, I think actually I said who it was with. It could be lying. It may not be. You block that out later. It ain't gonna come back to him, I hope. So I'm leaving names out, and I'm not pointing fingers. When I started there, the main instructor, in this tree, he didn't give me the time of day, but he wouldn't give anybody the time of day.
Yeah.
It was one of those, like, you had to show up. And I kind of get that, because I'm also a blue belt under Hoist Gracie, and Hoist is kind of the same way. Okay. But he earned his right to be.
He did.
Yeah. Hoist's mindset is like, man, I get thousands of students a month, but he interacts with these students a month, and I'm like, going to, and so they only last a few months to a year. So it's like, we caught up with just the fact that you're Hoist Gracie, I get my hoist punt, I get to meet him, and then I'm leaving. It's just like, why am I developing a friendship, a relationship, and then they leave? Right. So it's one of those, like, he'll be nice to you and be cool with you, but it's just like he's really, like, off-putting at first until you're around because of that. Yeah. So I understand that, So at the time, I was new. I couldn't touch my toes. Like, and you know how flexibility is. I couldn't touch my toes. I could do like 10 push-ups and felt good about myself. Now doing 10 push-ups, I still have to feel good about myself. It never got easier.
Right. It's still tough for me.
Yeah. So the way the class is set up is you have one main instructor that circles schools, and then you have a bunch of small instructors. So at that time, there is a guy there named Matt Guzman. I'll give his name because of who he is to me. And Matt was the first person I ever looked at as a hero, because the school was mediocre. The instructors were as expertise. There's more of a talk, just like, okay, do punches, go. So you're doing this,
Yeah.
You're not really critique, what have you. Yeah. But Matt Guzman, man, it's like everything he did was like perfect. Like he could kick really cool, he could kick really high. He just always looked sharp, and he could do all these tricks, and he's just a cool dude. So I would always try to be like, hey man, try to be cool with him. And he was kind of like, I was 12, he was like 16, 17 at the time.
Yeah. Which
makes him, he's old. Now teasing. He'd always, be like, as a mentor stay, but that was about as far until we had a demo team, and I tried out for their demo team. And man, I put everything I had in to make it. And when I made it and I got to go to stuff, I was like, dude, and that's what Matt was on. He's one of the captains for it, and he was doing fight scenes, like, tricks, everything you think of when you think martial arts. And one day, we're going to one at Wintersmith, and we're riding together, and I said, hey, Ezra, you go to church anywhere? I told him, so, at that point I was living with my grandparents.
Yeah.
So, well, if I live with, if I'm visiting my mom, there's a church that we kind of go to. When I lived with my dad, we went to a church. But when I'm, now I'm new to living with my grandparents, I didn't really have, set. So he invited me to his church, and he's regretted it ever since. We have grown up to be, best friends. It's really amazing. Like, because he's one of those that he can be a jerk. Straight up, like I'll insult him all the time, straight up, But man, there's not anything I wouldn't do for that young man or his family. Yeah. And then when he got married, I was a senior, and his wife I was kind of friends with. She looks at it as like we were just friends at school, but not really friends. Yeah. I look at it as like, I thought we were homies. Yeah. Is this one-sided? Like I wasn't that cool to you, But anyway, so I was like, you know what? I hope he sees this. I'll tell you straight. So in school, he would blow me off to go hang out with her.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which I'm fine, because I'm like, hey man, yeah, what I'm saying, like I'm cool with that. But he was kind of dishonest a little bit about it, which he apologized for good, But it took him forever, and I was like, man, he kind of wants him some Genesis cakes, which is cool. And so I'm at school and I'm telling her about it. Well, she had a huge crush on him, and he was just like, oh, I'm not into her like that. We're just friends. Yeah, I'll bet. It's kind of like me and like Jennifer Aniston. We're just friends too. Anyway, lo and behold, they end up dating, and I called it. Like I knew that, and then I called. Man, they're probably going to get married soon. They end up getting married. And, and then now they have 2 beautiful girls. They're my kids. I always tell them, like, these are my kids. They're just raising them for me because I'm a bad parent too, But I just love those children to death. But yeah, he was my first hero. And I was with that program for 8 years. There was a lot of dishonest things that was going on in between. Because in a sense, would this be fair? I was like a mascot for it.
Yeah.
For a while there.
I would say so.
Yeah. Anytime you thought that I was the person, so I did it. And I befriended everybody, but the main guy liked to pit instructors against each other, and he liked to badmouth people behind their back. And it just became, it wasn't what martial arts was supposed to be, as a dishonest, And at that point, I have to give him credit. He's the guy who introduced me to the concept of Bill Wallace.
Okay.
By the way, I'm repping. Okay. He's the one that first introduced that name, and he regrets it ever since too. We used to drive to Purcell together. And we'd do a language class, and I'd help teach. I was young, but I was like an orange belt, and I'd be teaching green belts and brown belts how to pass their test, because I became a nerd, and I was one of those, like, I would train here, and then I'd go train here, and I would train here, but without stopping here. It's like, this is my home, and this is what I'm doing to make my home better. And that's how I did things.
Yeah.
And I would practice all the time, and so I became more proficient than people that had been in it. So at that point, I was in it for like 3 or 4 years, and I had the same proficiency as someone who'd been in it for 8 or 10 years, But it's because I'm putting in 40 hours a week.
Right.
They might put in 4.
Right.
So that means I'm gonna improve 10 times faster. So once I started getting proficient, he would, start taking me under his wing and go to different places, But the thing is, like, if martial arts was this rock, he only knew about this much. It would only share this much, and you have all this out there. But it would, give like false hopes and false dreams and stuff like that, what have you, right?
So is that why you kind of started to expand, like trying to meet these other people,
Yeah.
trying to learn the rest of this rock?
What was rough is because, as I discussed, my dad issues, like my father issues. Yeah, he'd come and say, you never had a father. I could be the father you never had. And then look what that turned out. That right there is like a kicker.
Yeah.
And for a while there, why it was so personal.
Yeah.
Now, what started is we were on our way to Purcell, and we were talking about, because he unfortunately, he liked to use other people's lives as his own, okay? Which, it don't matter. And he brought up a guy named Joe Louis, and not the boxer. There's a black boxer named Joe Louis, the brown bomber, and then there was a karate guy named Joe Louis, who had worked with Bruce Lee, and him and Wallace are who pioneered kickboxing in America during the 70s, okay? So he says the name Bill Superfoot Wallace, and was talking about how this cat used to kick people in the face at will and was so fast and is known for his foot. And I'm like, yeah, it'd be cool to kick someone in the face. Well, being typical, it's probably 16 at the time kid.
Yeah.
Whipped out the phone, YouTube Bill Wallace. Is this him? He's like, yeah, it's him. And so I started some kind of like tribute video or whatever that I found and watched it, and I was like, no, this is like what you see in a movie. Is always when you do martial arts, you're like, okay, what's in the movie is not real life. Like, we don't really kick people in the face that much until I see this dude kicking people in the face at will. Like, you can't stop
just
him.
in competitions.
In actual fights.
Yeah.
Demos, no, actual fights. And you're just like, go. So I would research him like crazy. I'd find if he had some YouTube videos, he still has them, of instructionals. I would go home every single day. He has this hour-long kicking video. I did the whole hour on my left leg. Then I would do the whole hour on my right leg. I had 2 hours a night.
Wow.
About 3 or 4 months later, and I'm watching this, I have it memorized, and I'm still doing it with him. I find another video. He had some sparring techniques. Son, I would do 4 hours a night, back to back of each, two each leg. And after that, after I really picked up that strategy, and then I'm starting to develop how the superfoot filter, as I call it. And then he had books, because he had a master in kinesiology and physiology. And I get his books and I would be reading them. I'd be in class, have my textbook up, and inside's this paperback, stretching and kicking book by Bill Wallace. And I read that, like, I'm studying, And then I would do that. And then when I started competing, like, I was an okay competitor. It was mainly because I was bigger. But after that, like, I went like undefeated for like 3 years. And that's where like Garn's huge trophy. Like, I never had a state champ. But every time we went to Texas once a year, I stopped their state champ from regaining his title several times because you have to win so many, and I'd take that win from him. And
So do you think like that kind of helps you kind of gain some focus, learning how to kind of set goals and focus?
It did. My first goal was to be able to kick like this. Is one of those, you'll never meet him. That's like saying, like, you know what? My favorite rapper is Eminem. I'm gonna go meet Eminem. How many people say that? How many people do that?
Right.
It's the same. It was the same thing. It'd be like, my favorite guy is Bill Superfoot Wallace. Like, I'll never meet him. Like, he's my hero. I had him, Joe Louis, Joe Louis, Michael Jai White, and Cynthia Rothrock were the only 4 people I ever kept pictures of on my wall. Right. And they were my favorite kicker. So he was my hero. I'd get ready for school, and I'm like, man, I want to be flexible like that. I want to kick like that, So that was my first goal, was to kick like that. And the instructor always told me, he said, you're too big. You'll never be able to do the splits. You'll never be able to kick someone in the head because you're just too big. You can't move your legs like that. Well, there's truth in big guys are slow. But through these videos, how we first started, I developed fast twitch muscle fibers. I'm sure you guys do. So you have slow twitch muscle fibers, fast twitch muscle fibers. And fortunately, I was gifted with them. I was just never showed how to use them and perfect them and make them better. So I have all that 8 years at that point. If I would have been in a good place, dude, there's no telling where I'd be. You know what I mean? You'd have your own podcast interviewing me. Like, you'd be big too. Like, I'd take all my friends with me, All right, so after that, my next goal was, like, and by the time I'm in high school, I think I was working with it. I said, dude, one day I'm going to meet him. Like, I'd call y'all in, hey, check this guy, one day I'm going to meet him someday. I'd watch his fights. I would fight just like he did, even though he was smaller. And it was really hard for me to pick your leg up like that. I said, I'm going to fight like him. Well, lo and behold, if you're persistent, like Michael Jai White says, if you believe it, you can achieve it. He never back down 3. Found a way to contact him. I get his number. I call him. I'm calling him like, oh my God. What do you say? Don't be that dude. Don't be a nerd. Don't be a nerd. And he answers it. No, he doesn't answer. It's his answering machine. And so I was like, my name's Ezra. My birthday's coming up. I want to have you come down for a birthday party. I was like, I think I was turning 20, maybe 21. So I was 16. I'll be turning 20. And so anyway, I don't think nothing of it. But I'm like, man, I got his number. I save his picture, his profile. So well, I'm pretty cool. A few days later, I'm conked out. I'm napping on the couch, and I get this phone call. I lift my phone up, and it says Bill Wallace. Because you don't think nothing of it. Yeah, right. That's exactly what it was. What? So I answer it, and I was like, hello? And he goes, Ezra? And I was like, yeah? Yeah, what is it? And he goes, this is Bill Wallace. You called me. Like duh. And I was like, oh, yeah. I'm cracking up, And so we started talking. I found out how much he charged. And I've talked with him about that. And he's like, man, I thought this was just some kid that wanted to meet me. I would never hear from him. A few months later, I sent him worked with send the down payment. I brought him down. And we connected. I always tell people he's literally, his personality, and it could be because I started, because I had already been following him for like 3 years at that point, and doing his stuff for 3 years, just not from him. And he's an older version of me. Like, our personality was like perfect, so we became good friends. We pick him up from the airport. I'm trying not to nerd out. We had stopped at Senior. I got a bunch of DVDs.
I kind of remember a little bit.
Yeah. And I wanted him to sign them, but I didn't want to have him there because I
Yeah.
didn't want him to be like, oh, it's this guy. He gets in on that side of the truck and sees it. And he goes, oh, look at this handsome guy. Oh, it's people like you that keep me off the streets. It's perfect, So, dreams come true. My teachers at school said, man, you met your hero. Like, they saw
Yeah.
that. Because that's really, because I'm a nobody from Ada, Oklahoma. And remember, I had that mentality growing up.
Yeah.
How did this happen?
Yeah.
And then I became one of his black belts after a few years. So I'm his only rep here. So it's like, wow, that can happen. Anything can happen.
So kind of going with all that, like, you have this kind of this belief, if you believe it, you can achieve it.
Mm-hmm. Michael
So
John
where
White.
do you see yourself going from here? Like, what's the next thing for Ezra?
So from a martial arts standpoint, I love teaching. Okay, and I teach different than a lot of people around here do. Even at an early age, I started when I was 14 teaching people. That's before I was driving.
Yeah.
Okay, and it was weird.
That's like 10 years.
Yeah, right. It's 10 years of teaching. You're right. So here I'm 14, and you're teaching people that's like in their 30s and 40s,
Right.
and they're like, you're like a mentor to me. What, how does that deal with you?
Yeah.
You're like, man, I should be looking up to you. Like, you got
Yeah.
your stuff together. Right? I'm just a kid. I love teaching, and I teach a lot of private lessons with people, officers, military guys. An interesting one for a while there was school teachers. I've had school teachers, because also I do Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, is how, like, we had the shooting issues going around.
Yeah.
Like, how do you deal with out of control kids, because you can't pop them.
Yeah.
How do you control them? And so I'd work with them on that. As a fighter, I'm working on trying to take this fight. Hopefully, I don't see it happening this year. It might. I don't see it happening before this year's out. Hopefully, early to mid next year. We've already tried to reach out to his guy to see if he wants to take it. We'll see.
What like karate?
Yeah, it'll either be a kickboxing fight or an MMA fight. And unless he wants to box, I'll box too. I'm not stingy.
Okay.
Which there's a little bit different in karate and kickboxing strategy. As an acting standpoint, I really want that as my career. Like, I would love to do that. And when I got to meet Michael, that really helped. Really, like, this is possible. So I did a Facebook Live. I had commented like, hey, what's up? I hope you're doing well. And it gives me a shout out on there. And then the Cameo, you know what Cameo is?
I don't.
And Cameo is like this platform where you can hire like celebrities to give you like a greeting, a happy birthday, a message to somebody, or something. And it was during the COVID, and I was told it's to help them, celebrities still make money to get through, if you can hire them. I was like,
Yeah.
So I'm checking it out. I see my boy's on there. You see, it was always one of these things where, yeah, I know Michael, we're friends, and I wasn't that bad, but I'd be like, I know him, like, or I've met him is how I said it. And I always said, I was one of those like, hey, I consider him my friend, but he may not consider me his friend, just that he knows me type of thing, right? So I do this Cameo. I send him the money. I request, hey, give me some tips on martial arts and get my acting career going. And a week later, I get mine back, and I saved the first half of this. Anytime I screw up in life, I play this first half because he was not a fan of this at all. And his first thing he started, so you push play. I'll show it to you later. So you push play. He's like, Ezra, what are you doing? His first lines of the thing. And I was like, oof, So anytime I play that. But he was like, man, like, you know me, just, you can message me, blah, So he was like, well, why would you pay? And then he goes, like, we know each other, unless this is a different Ezra Johnson, but I'm sure it's you. So, like, yeah, I had to tease with that. Yeah. So anyway, and after that, like, boom, I've been able to, even Smallman, we don't get to talk a lot, he's busy.
Right.
But he has, publicly, people associated me as a friend. He was doing this, a Zoom, questionnaire with people, and I got to be on there and watch it. And someone asked him, the dude was like 300 pounds, he talks about, hey, I'm a big guy, how can I be fast? And he says something like, I'm a big guy, I'm not very fast, how can I be a good fighter? What can I do? and he said, well, you know, my bro, and he said just like that. You know, like, I was picking up on it.
Yeah.
He said, you know, my bro Ezra Johnson in here, he's a big mother, you know, and he's fast as, you know. I was like, me, you know. So I was nerding out, you know. It was really cool.
Yeah.
Because it's like this dude's saying I have good kicking techniques. The dude who kicks perfect all the time, you know, like Joe Rogan gives him, like, you check that out, you know. So I was pretty cool. So I'm able to start doing movies, and I'm hoping to build up a big enough database. You know, we'll jump back into it. I do fight scenes. I'm usually the bad guy. But again, that was one of my goals. The biggest thing everybody says is just be you and it'll work out. What does that mean? What does that mean? Well, literally, how I talk to you is how I talk to them.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes it can be considered too goofy. Sometimes it's not goofy. You don't have to be in the situation.
Yeah.
But I always want to treat people the same in the sense I want you to feel like you've known me forever.
Yeah.
Okay. So that way there's not really any discomfort. You know.
Right.
And if there is discomfort, it's not going to be hard for you to walk away. So that way it's like if you walk, you're like, all right, this is too much. I'm just going to peace out. It will be awkward for you to do that. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like easier on everybody.
Yeah, I feel like you're a very easy person to talk to.
Hey,
really.
Talk to. Okay.
No. Like I feel like you just kind of are just very open, and I feel like you've always kind of been that way. Though I mean that's who you since I've known you, anyways. But I don't know like where that was shaped from. As you know, you're talking about your childhood and going through everything. With your parents and siblings and all that, so I don't really know if you just kind of just started to open up to just everybody, if that became easier for you.
Well, in elementary, back Pickett Center days, I didn't really have a sense of humor. Like it was bad. Even you know how there's jokes that are so bad that they're good, and then you got some that are just garbage. You're just like crickets like that, you know, like. Everybody would say jokes, and everybody would be laughing, and they'd get like almost like positive attention, positive vibes. You're like, yeah, I want that. Yeah. So I try to say jokes, and no one would get it. Well, for one, sure, I grew up in your time period, but what I relate to, like books and stuff, are from like our teachers' childhood. Yeah. So they don't like Starsky and Hutch. They don't know who Starsky and Hutch is. Yeah. So like I used to go around saying like knock knock. Who's there? Hutch. Hutch who? Ah, you sneezed. And they're like, right? They don't get it. They don't know who Hutch is, you know? So it's not funny to them, you know? And I didn't really laugh a lot. I didn't really smile a lot. I wasn't really, I would consider myself friendly, but I was really like, I was Spock. Star Trek, I was Spock.
So what kind of changed in there for you?
Man, actually... All right, so definitely when I left my dad, because I wasn't really a fun guy in the sense of like, dude, this is my boy. It was more like I was always loyal to people and I would treat people good and I would like do whatever I could to help people. That's why we were friends. Okay. Yeah. But later, after I left, I started at Bing. My first couple years at Bing was rough. It wasn't still like real. I guess Wallace even gave me that. I'm not trying to tie it back into him, but even like if you watch his videos, like he had a really good personality. Yeah. And I've watched that enough, and you watch them so much, like it forms on you. Yeah. And then meeting Guzman, like that just became my personality. I read this book called Against All Odds by Chuck Norris, and his childhood was a lot like mine, and you know, and then how he would treat people was like that's me. And I always said like if I ever make it big and I'm famous, I'm never going to know I'm famous. Like, if someone comes up off to the street, it's like, oh my God, hey man, how's it, you know, and shake, you know, and be cool. Okay, yeah, only if I can have one too, you know, and be cool with them, and then treat people good, you know, and I've always, since then, I kind of grew out of that and do that. And then I started doing character analysis for something. In fact, it wasn't until maybe when I did South Pacific working with y'all, and I said, hey, I'm doing this stage production. Might be right at the end before y'all went across the street. I was still working for the gym. Chickasaw, I want to get back into doing big acting and not just from plays. But I was never funny. I was never really I took terrible. It was stupid. Natalie May was doing. She was the director for South Pacific, and they had a really good actor to play the character Billis, but it was played by Adam, but Adam decided he wants to open up Jimmy John's, so he couldn't commit to it.
Yeah.
And that was halfway through rehearsals. So everybody was like, man, we got to have someone that was that good in this halfway through come in. And I had messaged Shane Scrogg. I don't know if you know Scrogg. He was my drama teacher at Bean, and we stayed friends. He's a really cool guy. And I was, hey, man, I'm going to get back in acting. He said, well, we're doing this play. You might be able to pick up an extra. Hit up Natalie May. And I knew Natalie from the Arts Academy, so I was messaging her in the meeting. And she goes, actually, I know just the part for you. I was hoping for, if I had a line, I was happy. But one or two, right? Yeah. They give me one of the leads halfway through, and I can't sing. I can rap, as you know, but I can't sing, you know, right? I never had voice training. And so I have to go through this thing, and they kept saying, you know, so a lot of the cast was really resentful. And this is where my personality had been developing, you know, because of obviously going out and Wallace and all that. The resentment was, look, here's some kid out of nowhere. All these people are college grads that went for acting. You know, I'm like 19, whatever hell I was, you know, and I can't sing because I'm upfront about it. And I have to fill these big shoes that were filled perfectly before me. So they're like, come on. It's like Will Smith doing Genie. How do you do that, right? But not that large a scale, but like that, you know? Everybody was like, oh, this ain't going to be good. So everybody kept trying to tell me all about how Adam did it. And I was like, oh, good for him. You know, they'd give me a DVD. I never watched the musical. I never watched their copy of them doing it because I didn't want to be him. What I wanted to do, based on how the character was, you know, he's kind of a con artist, you know, kind of sorry. I was like, okay, Jim Carrey and Robin Williams, if they had a love child, it's going to be Bill. So I started watching a bunch of their stand-up and how their charisma, how they would act, you know, how they'd be over the top, you know, like, are you kidding me? Like, no one talks like that, right. You know? Right. And so I started putting that into my character, and it worked. I was Billis, but I wasn't their Billis, and it was still, like, I had a good feedback from that. And ever since then, everybody's like, man, like, you know, like, the cast, they're like, okay. And then when I couldn't sing, and they're like, oh, it don't matter. No, it did matter, and they found out. they had to work around that, you know? But that I did, and that's where my personality, and it stayed. Like, it stayed. So, I'm Billis. I'm just appropriate most of the time now, stuff sometimes. You know, and if you think about it, sometimes we all need a good laugh.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes we all need a good laugh.
Oh yeah.
You know, like I always tell, I can have them going with one-liners, man. You know, like, man, I told you I was poor growing up, right? It was rough. Like, we didn't have the money to like have my tonsils removed. We just had them loosened. You know, and I'd be like, yeah, I thought about doing stand-up, I just keep falling down. You know, so and that's where the personality comes in.
Okay.
And then I always tell people, kill a guy, a bunch of different Ezras. You know, because I mean, obviously, you know, I've been serious, like, especially when it comes down to it, especially, you know, but I try, like, I want people to enjoy my company because I don't want to have to go through, growing up of, look, I'm going to meet you and you're going to leave. Okay, my mom left, my dad left, my grandparents, they don't talk, whatever, like, my family neglects me. And that's what I go through. My friends, you know, they neglect me. It's like I'm only friends when you need me. And so I'm like, man, something's got to go. So I want you to enjoy my company so much that you want my company to enjoy, you know?
Yeah.
And that was my go-to for a while. And that's how I finally developed the Ezra Johnson now.
Okay. Well, Ezra, I appreciate your time, man. I mean,
my pleasure.
I've enjoyed talking to you, like I said before, and thank you.
Hey, it was my pleasure. You better get an A. That's all I got to say. Give him an A. He's a good guy.